So now I'm thrilled to introduce our moderator for today for our event, Develop Better Technology, Discovering UX Design and Research, Haley Dean. So I'm going to pass it over to you, Haley, and I will be back for our Q&A.
Thanks, Anna. Saw a lot of you from Texas. I'm based in Austin, Texas. A quick background on myself. I'm a senior technical recruiter with Specialist Staffing Group, specifically under Computer Futures, our IT staffing brand. I'm going to be posing questions to our lovely panel today. So I'll pass it over to them to introduce themselves. Jen, do you want to kick us off?
Sure, I'll go first. Hi, everyone. My name is Jen Blatz, and I'm a user experience researcher based in a suburb of Dallas, Texas, in the United States. I work at a credit union known as BECU, who's headquartered in Seattle. I'm also one of the co-founders of a pretty large meetup known as UX Research and Strategy. We have free events. We actually have one coming up November 1st. I'll put a link in the chat if you're interested in attending our events or joining our community. And I think that's enough about me.
Awesome. Adrienne, do you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Adrienne Guillory. I'm also based in Dallas, Texas. I am technically the COO of a company called Usability Sciences, but to me, I do research and operations in my free time. I am also a co-founder of an organization called Dallas Black UX, where we help people of color get mentorships, and we go on field trips to different companies throughout the Metroplex to get a feel for how they do design and research, content development at those companies. And then I also teach design thinking at UT Arlington. So all that to say, research and design strategy is pretty much what consumes Jen and I all the time. All the time.
Hello, I'll go. So I'm Manu. I'm currently a design research manager at Abercrombie and Fitch. And I have lately started this role around 7 to 8 months ago, before which I was working at Amazon for their Alexa's diversity and inclusion program, making sure the technology is accessible for everybody. A lot of my work has been into accessibility and people for good problems, solving good problems for people, more philanthropic in nature. I'm also a dancer and a singer and an artist on the side. I'm a part-time coach and a mentor to people who are just stepping into UX research. And I'm so happy to be here and to see so many people attend our session today and talk more about UX research.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to start asking you some questions, but we'll take it from the top. How would you define UX and UI, and what does that mean in terms of your role currently? And I'll open it to the group, whoever wants to go first.
No, so I like to start this conversation, even before you get into UX, UI, I like to start with user experience as an umbrella term, okay? So most of us on this call, we do research, which is one of those kind of umbrella, comes from that user experience umbrella. But then it's also content. What words do we use? How do we communicate? There's also design, the UI part, what's physically on the screen. There's the development piece. So when we talk about user experience, understand that there are different facets that fall under that, different disciplines that fall under that. So then going back to your question, the difference between user experience and the UI or user interface is the user interface is the thing that's there, right? Be it a website, an app, a bottle, a phone, whatever the case may be. That's the interface. The experience is how we use it. The experience is what we can and can't do with it. That's the difference between the two.
I like to think of I agree with everything Adrienne just said, but I just want to add one other caveat to it. As user experience to me is how the product makes you feel as a person using it. So a lot of times we think of user experience from our standpoint and how we experience a product, like how Adrienne mentioned, which is totally true. There's also another facet to it, which I've lately discovered, is how the product makes us feel. Does the product make us feel like we are capable of using it? Does the product make us feel inferior? Does it make us feel superior? For example, if you can use a phone seamlessly, that means the phone is designed for you. It's making you feel good about using that product. If the phone's too hard for you to figure out how to use, where are the buttons, where's the press code, I think that's not designed for you. And it's safe to say that you don't feel so good about using it. So it's also going vice versa, and how you feel about a product and how the product makes you feel is also comprised of that umbrella term of user experience as a whole.
Could not have said it better than these two ladies, so I want to park it there.
Yeah, that was great. I'll ask each of you, and we can go in the same order or we can mix it up. What was your personal journey into UX, and what about the field was appealing to you?
I can start with this one. I started out in journalism, actually. So I started out as a newspaper designer and then went into magazine design. And what was similar is communication and trying to design with people in mind. I designed a newspaper thinking about the person who just wants to get the high level what's going on rather than read all 20 inches of the story. So I was always thinking about entry points and visuals to make that piece of information enticing, but yet enough that if they didn't have time to read the whole story, they still got something out of it. And so that was, I guess, an early parlay into user experiences, thinking about what value can I provide the reader without forcing them to read the entire story. So I started with that, and then so very heavy graphic design background, and then that transitioned into UI or user interface design, so visual design for websites, and then getting more exposed to the other parts of user experience, building journey maps and understanding our users and learning about those different things that Manu and Adrienne just talked about. So a lot of roles, I was a UX team of one and had to do all the things and learn how to do all the things ASAP. So that's when I got kind of familiar with research. And I just found that I got more excited about learning about the user than building the interface as a result of what I was learning. So my transition I got more and more into the research, and larger companies, those roles are often split. Like a smaller UX team, you might be a UX team of one and taking on more roles and doing more diverse things. Larger companies, you might have dedicated UX researchers, dedicated UX designers. And so when I was at a larger company, I actually had to choose, which one do you want to be? Which one do you want to do? So I was like, dig in the research. So I'm going to go in that direction. And since then, I've kind of stuck in the research path. So that's kind of how I got into user experience.
That is such a fascinating journey that I've heard, Jen. I have come into research in a non-traditional method myself too. So I have started out as a bachelor in business administration and business studies. That would mean marketing as my major and consumer behavior as my major. And then I was so intrigued with consumer behavior and the concepts within it and psychology that leads up to certain behaviors. I've taken international marketing and international negotiations as my majors in my masters. And so got into research, academic research that way. And then after that, I have conducted studies for field studies, for internships and market research for some companies. And then I figured talking to people is what's really making me happy rather than sitting behind the desk and reading through the immense list of articles and data sheets. So then I began talking to people and understanding what makes them like a product, what makes them use a product, or how do they go about understanding to use a product, the learnability of a product. All of these kind of came into picture. And then I actually stumbled upon a book very interestingly called Measuring You, and then Measuring User Experience, I think quantitative measurement of user experience. And there was one chapter that talked about research. Until then, I have never heard of user research. I've only been doing market research. There was a chapter on user research, which actually captivated me. And then I went into the chapter and seemed like I was doing everything that the chapter was talking about, and there's nothing different from what I was doing except the aspect of talking more to the people. So then I picked that up, and ever since I've become a researcher. And then after 7 years, here I am as a research manager, now trying to mentor and coach junior researchers who are just stepping into research. And I'm trying to get into the pathway that I got into once and making this journey easy and seamless for them in any way I can help.
So my journey is completely out of left field. So immediately before I came to Usability Sciences, I was a restaurant manager. I loved everything about hospitality, but I was in an unfortunate situation where I was forced to choose between running a restaurant and finishing my master's degree. So I decided I didn't want to work a real job. I wanted to date jobs for a while. So I started working for a temp agency that brought me to Usability Sciences. I didn't know what user research was. We didn't even call it user experience at that time. So my first few months was as a receptionist. And then I was brought on full time. And my first 2 years was probably in participant recruiting. So for those of you who don't know, like, we can't do our jobs if we don't have the right people. And that in itself is a science, one that Usability Sciences is really good at, actually. So I did that for a couple of years. And then we do this weird thing at Usability Sciences where we like shut down in December. And everybody is taking vacation, and we had a last minute project come in, and I was the only recruiter on staff. And they're like, hey, we need somebody to go support another researcher in the lab. Will you do it? Up until this point, y'all, I had never even seen a usability study. I didn't care, right? I just needed to find the people. I hadn't even sat in a lab yet. But the very first study I'll never forget was for contraceptive. So our participants were young women, 18 to 25, sharing what they understood about contraceptives and the type of information they were looking for. It was like better than watching an episode of Maury. I could not believe that people were opening up that way and sharing their stories. And I'm nosy. And I was like, oh my God, this is a job. This is what I need to do. So that is what I did. And I've just stuck to user research the entire time. I'm super nosy. The other part I like about this job and why I stayed is I get to get everybody's business and then go tell people what to do with it, right? So some of the findings that came out of that research was these young women had a totally different mindset about contraceptive, even the language that they used to talk about it, than the business who was creating the app for them. And there was a disconnect. So being able to find those disconnects and then kind of influence the direction of the product, I was told this is what I want to do.
Awesome. I was looking at all the comments in the chat, and everyone's enjoying hearing all of your backgrounds. So everyone on the panel is a UX researcher. Can you explain more of your day-to-day work and how research works alongside with design?
So I can start this one because mine is very different. So Usability Sciences is a full-service user research firm. So all we do is research, and we do that on behalf of our clients. So Fortune 100 companies and whatnot, big companies. So for me, my day-to-day is going to look a little bit different than the other two ladies. If for no other reason, we're doing 8, 9, 10 projects in a month, right? And I have different clients. So most of my day is scoping research projects. Because I manage the operations team, I need to make sure that I have the right researchers to do it, have, some sort of subject matter, making sure we define who the right people are. But more importantly than all of that, educating my clients, because sometimes people hear buzzwords and they're like, I need a focus group. Baby, no, you don't. Like, let's talk about what you're trying to do and what you need to accomplish. So most of my day-to-day is either scoping new work, assigning or building strategies with my team, and then developing my team.
I would say my role is not very different from Adrienne's, just the scope of it is in a more retail space. So I'm in a retail industry, Abercrombie and Fitch. So we deal a lot with the websites and the UI of the app and how that speaks to the customers. How do people go about finding the clothes they need? How do they go about the purchasing journey? What's going on with their experience from the time they enter the website till the time they exit? Are they able to find what they need? Are we showing what they really want? Are we showing too much noisy concepts on the website? So there are a lot of questions our teams have. So we have different teams split into squads. So each squad has a product manager, a researcher, a designer, and a content person with them. So it's similar to how pods, you are probably familiar with pods or squads. So I oversee the research that happens across 9 squads and with 3 researchers. So we allocate research projects to each other. We triage which one's more complex versus not so complex, and which one can be pulled off easily versus takes some time, which one requires more in-depth study versus a quick study that can happen over 2 days or 3 days. We assess if something needs a survey versus an interactive interview. We also assess how would this study impact the product roadmap and what is it going to mean to the business impact that we are developing the solutions for. And along with this, my job also entails developing and coaching my researchers in the new forms of research that they can do, improving their deliverables and report writing skills, making sure they're up-leveling their insights and sometimes people tend to confuse between finding an observation and an insight. So making sure everybody understands the language, and to Adrienne's point, educating the product owners and the partners that we work with about what research is and why we are doing what we are doing and how that actually translates to their product. These are some of the fascinating things I do on the job. And also on the side, I personally ran a self-service program. I run a self-service program with the designers. So the designers get to do their research as well. So it's not just researchers doing the entire thing, but also we share the load amongst the designers. They get to be talking to the participants themselves. They get to dip their toes into research, run small surveys or studies, and get to understand how the end customer is thinking about their experiences and the designs that they're actually building. So it's a separate program that I run along with the day-to-day jobs that we do. So every Thursday we run a study testing Thursday. We call it testing Thursday. So every testing Thursday we have customers coming in and our designers test with them and run their usability sessions with them. And we mentor them together.
Great. Well, thank you for this perspectives. It's funny. I too do a lot of what you both have mentioned, even though I'm more in the weeds in an IC or individual contributor role. As a principal researcher, I'm kind of a little bit higher than some researchers on my team. So I do take on that mentorship and teaching others about research methods and how to do a discussion guide and a research plan and the importance of doing that, not just skipping into the designs, and that kind of evangelism and education with our designers, our product partners, and other people within the organization is also something I think we all do. Something you're not aware of, a big part of your job is actually explaining what your job is rather than actually doing it. And explaining why a survey is not going to get you to the data that you want, or a focus group, like what Adrienne said, is not going to get you to the answers that you want. So explaining that, illustrating the value of research and showing how, hey, you have a question about that, I can get the answer. I can get you better informed to mitigate risk, to make better decisions, to make the right decisions, to save the developers time. All this goes way before most of where our product partners are thinking and working, how much we need to get ahead of that train, and explaining why that's important and showing that. And so I'd say that's a big part of it. Also, like I mentioned, teaching other designers and researchers about different methods and approaches and why you do what, when, and what works best. And sometimes you can't do all the things. So what's the smaller bite-sized value that we can provide in a quick amount of time versus, oh, we have 4 months to do this, we have more time to do that, and balancing that as well. So I'd say those are probably the bigger pieces of my role as a researcher in the last few years.
Awesome. Thanks for diving a little bit deeper into all of that, the day-to-day, and the specifics too. For the job seekers on the call, can you provide advice for navigating this market, understanding job advertisements, prepping for an interview, or any red flags to look out for?
I like to be the bearer of bad news, so I'll kick it off and then they can fill in. So one of the things that has been a huge question that we're getting lately is, you're new to this space, how do you get a job? It's going to be a tough one, okay? And the reason that is not because research doesn't love new people, UX design doesn't love new people. The problem that we have is coming out of the digital transformation, which is what happened, in 2020. A lot of companies ramped up. They did a lot of research. They did a lot of design. What's happening is a lot of people started to finish those projects. So you have more senior people now in the market. So the newbies are competing with mid and senior level people. So I don't see a regression in jobs. I just see the jobs out there as being harder to get. So then you have to be creative with how you get experience. And this is the part people don't usually like. Some of it is going to have to be on your own practicing. Some of it is going to have to be reaching out to families and friends who have businesses or charity organizations and looking for opportunities to help them for free to build up your portfolio. Some of you will have to take contract positions, and a lot of times we don't like to do that when we're first starting out. But how you get into research or design in any capacity today is going to look very different than when any of us did it. And that will continue to change. That's a pendulum thing that happens to us every few years. But what I would tell you is to stay encouraged. If you really love this work, then look for opportunities to do it. Find something to pay your bills in the meantime. For those of you who are already kind of in that mid to senior level position, now it's just finding the job that you want and realizing sometimes you may have to go into the office. Sorry, those days are dwindling for some of us. You may have to go into the office. You may not be able to command the same type of salaries people were asking for in 2020, 2021, right? So some of those perspectives are changing a little bit. But if you're interested in the space, you have to be vigilant, right? Nobody's going to show up to your door offering you a job. You'll have to work and kind of go some more non-traditional ways to get there today.
Yeah, I think that's a really excellent point, Adrienne. I mean, I will piggyback on the bearer of bad news because I get this question constantly. And it's true. My path to getting into UX, I mean, how many newspaper designers are there out there? Probably none, because they too have been losing their, newspaper industry is dwindling as well. But the bottom line is you have a lot of competition, like Adrienne said, with these seniors and mid-levels. So a hiring manager is going to look at somebody who has 3 to 5 years experience over 0. And that's the unfortunate truth. I hate that that's the reality. And to Adrienne's point, again, I get this question a lot. Show that you can do the work. Speak to it, show it. Don't show that you got a certificate somewhere or that you have a master's degree. I'm not saying that's not valuable, but a hiring manager wants to, you're getting hired for a job to do, not a degree that you have. So you need to show that you've done the work, that you know how to do the work. And they're going to pick somebody who has experience, a portfolio that illustrates they understand what method to use when, the impact that that research has, how to sell that, and how to make an impact on the organization, how to have a point of view, how to drive the team with your research. They're going to pick somebody over that has that skill set over somebody who's like, I've launched unmoderated usability test online and in class and right. So again, there's organizations, lots of organizations that have really crappy websites that you could help with. When I was first transitioning into UX, I went on, I don't know if we can Catch a Fire, Women Who Code is a good organization too, but I went on Catch a Fire, found a project because I needed to I need more experience with personas and journey maps and things that I couldn't do in my current job. So I volunteered my time to get that skill set and to show that I could do the work. I was fully employed in a UX position, but I wasn't getting the work experience that I needed. So I found it. I found a way to get it. And that would be my advice. Show that you can do the work.
I'd like to say all of that is true and also add another lens to it. So while I was self-taught into UX research, anybody can pick up on research methods that you can run. The books talk about it, the research methods you have. You can become an expert at it, a master at these different methods. But really, a good researcher, and it could be a zero years of experience or 5 years of experience, but a good researcher and a decent researcher or not so good researcher, the difference is really on how you see the data that comes out of your research. Not many researchers have the acumen or the innate quality to look at the data and pick the key insights that come and emerge from that data. So it could be like 5 out of 10 people said the same thing. One would interpret it as it's a majority out of minority. So let's go with the feature. Another person could say, but the 2 people didn't say something. Let's go ponder more about that 2 percentile. What is the percentile of it in the general population, and go more and probe more. Another person could say 5 out of 7 doesn't really hold a good number for me. Let me go into the depth and understand more interviews and conduct more studies and get to more details. It's really about that acumen that keeps you constantly questioning, is the data right? Am I getting to see the right data that's coming out? Because end of the day, UX research is an art between balancing communications with your product partners. It's a stakeholder management job. It's a client management job. You have to talk to your internal customers and external customers. It's also a self-developing job where you are coming up with your own expertise of methods and research rigor and coming up with your own improvements for your own self. At the same time, it's also about selling yourself. So all of these arts together, something must be speaking to your passion. There has to be some passion in this field, without which it gets really difficult to sell yourself. If you're just getting into it because it's a buzzword right now, a lot of people are getting into it without the passion, without the rationale to why you want to be a researcher, you'll end up being in a boat that is similar to also running horses. But if you know that you are a person who's like an innate curious person, like how Adrienne said, she's nosy. She picked up on her passion point. She picked up on something that she's good at, and then she made a career out of it. So I think I would advise everybody who's wishing to be into UX research or UX design or whichever field you want to self-discover your passion, understand what you're really good at, what your strengths are, irrespective of 0 years or 5 years or 3 years. If you can speak to your passion, because if you can show the employer that you have the skill to see the data for what it is and interpret the data between the lines, I think I would want someone like that on my team for sure. I don't care how many methods you have done or learned, you can learn that over job. But if you don't have the eye for data, you don't have the eye for insights, it's not going to get me anywhere with the team, or not can I feel trustworthy, or not can I do you feel trustworthy to be delegated more work or do more research projects on.
I would add to that. So there's the soft skills of being a researcher, right? So a lot of the work that we do is actually interviewing people. And you have to be able to meet people where they are. You have to be able to have the conversation and get them to give you information. You can't lead. You can't force anything. You have to build rapport in a very short amount of time. These are things or skill sets that you have to learn and grow into. So, we do see a lot of the people who go to programs, they get certificates, they get even degrees, but then they get to us and they don't understand how to have a conversation, how to even meet your stakeholders where they are, how we're constantly teaching. You heard all of us say that. That is a huge part of our job. And you have to build up that talent. And that's not something you're going to get from a book. You'll have to see it and you'll have to practice it. So when you think about things like training, going back to the question, one of the things that I can't do is I can't train curiosity. I can't train good, bedside manner. I can't train confidence. So when I'm looking at people that I would want to bring in, I'm looking at people who have the skill set, also have these soft skills that I can't train.
That was great. Adrienne, I think you touched on this a little bit too, but the UX talent landscape has certainly changed and evolved over the last decade or so. So now post-pandemic, can you all talk a little bit more about what the talent market looks like today from your perspective?
I would say, as a research manager, seeing some resumes and the talent that's coming in and pouring in into companies, a lot of us are, or a lot of those applicants are in the areas where they're just beginning to step into user research. Those who have settled as senior or mid-level researchers or principal researchers or managers, they are settled where they are. They are just exploring at the superficial level of what is my next step in career, how can I become more social, or how can I network myself to go further. But the ones that I'm seeing in the market are just stepping into research, or 2 years of experience, 1 year of experience, that they want to do something, but they have no avenue to come out and show, which is one of your questions on the chat as well. How do I show my work on the resume? Resume becomes a huge, huge hindrance, in my opinion, because end of the day, I'm a strong believer of networking. And if you can have people in a company who can teach you, who can coach you, who can tell you what the manager is looking for, that's the best way to go about job hunting in this market. Because the market is so tough that you just applying it via resume or via portfolio may not get you as far as you would have by forming a LinkedIn network connection, talking to somebody, asking them for an informational coffee chat, understanding what the job prospects look like, getting good sense of what the job is before you apply for it will give you the command and will give you the position of power to project yourself as where I want to be in the next 5 years. People like me are looking at candidates who know where they want to be in the next 2 years at least. They don't want to be shooting in the air saying, oh, I just want to pay my bills, so I want to get into a job. We're looking at people who really believe they can do the job, who have the passion to show that they can do the job and the willingness to learn on the job and show me that they can have the acumen and that skill set that I'm looking for. So it's really personal growth and networking, I would say, will get you to a farther distance than just a resume. Do not worry about your resume. Your resume can be gone through a scanning machine, may or may not reach me. It may tell you a little bit of who you are. I could still call upon you if I see something is a little extra. If you can put in an award or a speakership that you have done, or a mentorship program that you have taken on, or something outside of your work, any extracurricular activity, it would still catch my eye and call you in for an interview. And that's where you really have to differentiate yourself.
Yeah, I want to tack on to that a little bit, Manu, when you mentioned like the LinkedIn connections. Dark side here. Don't hit me up on LinkedIn because you saw us today and say, will you get me a job? Like, build relationships. Networking isn't just about the number of connections, it's about building genuine relationships and making genuine connections. Adrienne and I were connected through a mutual friend, right? And we've been friends for years. And there's a genuine relationship there. Make sure that you are fostering those relationships and not just, I'm just going to connect to everybody. It's not a numbers game, folks. It really isn't. And if you can take the time and the effort to build a mentor-mentee relationship with a few people, you'd be surprised how far that will get you. I have gotten jobs through my network. I have given jobs through my network. So she's right. Manu is completely right. That is a huge factor. I think there was a statistic like 80% of the jobs people get are through their network. And I have informed people of jobs that were never advertised. Like, there's this job at my company. I think you'd be a good fit. You should check it out. And it was because I had a relationship with that person. So that I just want to caveat that. Yes, make it LinkedIn connections, but understand, build a relationship, and don't be offended if that person's like, they can't set up a coffee chat, because if you think about it, coffee chat for 30 minutes a day, how many is that in a 24-hour period? Some of us I can't do that. Like, I wish I could, but I just can't. So don't get offended if somebody can't make that time to make that connection, just because they're probably getting hit. I do get hit up with quite a few, and I would love to meet with everybody and help everybody and throw everyone's resume out there, but I just physically, I just can't. So just be empathetic to your relationships that you're building as well, and being fair in your ask.
To that point, Jen, I just want to add one thing is asynchronous mentorship is taking a whole new level right now. You do not have to be talking to a person. You do not have to meet the person. You do not have to really spend a ton of time with the person. If you have resources that helped you, just pass it on. If you have something that helped you, that a portfolio that you have made for yourself, just pass it on. Any example work that you have done, just pass over to the next person so they can pass it on to a few more people. I think it becomes much easier for us who cannot spend that time for coffee chats or who cannot really mentor everybody one-on-one. But asynchronous mentorship is really what I wanted to just add to what you said.
So I'm going to do a shameless plug here, right? So when I think about networking, there are different levels. There are what I think a lot of people think about, which is, oh, let me connect with this person and I'm going to ask you questions, right? Here's one that people don't think about. Help, volunteer, join organizations where you would be around people who have the jobs that you want or are working towards a cause. So Jen, I don't know, I think it might have been Give Back Dallas was the event I met you at, right? She has UX research and strategy. I have Dallas Black UX. I also I'm chairing the UXPA International Conference next year. All of these organizations, I did work and it was free and I gave of my time. But in that, I got to know people. They got to know me. They see my work first. So in 20 years, I've applied for one job. One. Every other job came from people I either worked with at a company, right? Because how you show up every day matters because people remember, or an organization I volunteered through. Every single one. And back in my day, I couldn't go to a LinkedIn and say, hey, I'm interested in what you do. I didn't have this as an option. We had to be out. We had to engage with people. And it can't be from a individualistic type of a point of view. hey, we believe in these causes. Let me help you with these causes. And in that, you build relationships.
Yeah, that's really great. I think like just with all social media in general, right? You see the good side of things. You see people getting the job, you see the happy ending. You don't see the struggle that goes into that. And just keep in mind, it's a struggle for everyone. We're all having struggles, and sometimes it's struggles finding a job. And just understand that it may be looking like, oh, everyone else is getting a job but me, and that's not the case at all. Lots of people are struggling. I don't know that that makes you feel better, but just understand that it's a hustle and it's a bit of work right now to get into user experience research. And that's the unfortunate aspects of it, but that's the truth. Hundreds of applications per job.
Within minutes. I feel so bad for some of these hiring managers. They post a job and you go look at it on LinkedIn. It's like there were 175 applicants today. Goodness.
I see a question about where do you find a career like this, or where do you find organizations like this? I think from forums like this, from attending more forums like this, you understand people and their background and where they are coming from, their journey, and pick the points that actually speak to you. Like I have said, I have done market research in the past. Maybe I can come up with what my institute was at that point. You can look up the institute and look for any open roles. Or Adrienne has said she had worked in usability sciences forever. Maybe she would have people in the places that she had worked with and organizations that she had worked at. She can give you the names of those organizations and you can go from there. I think attending and being present at events like this will give you a lot of such avenues to begin with.
Yeah, along those lines, Manu, I want to tell a story of a friend many years ago when we were breaking into UX, trying to network. She came from a biology background. She was actually doing like testing for cancer. And what she did to make connections was, yes, she attended UX meetups, but she attended meetups in the industry where she had knowledge and where she was passionate about and where they needed help. So she was going to medical group meetups, doctor meetups, and nurses and whatnot, and learning about, oh, wow, they have this idea for an app. And she was the UX person who could help launch those products because those people are not UX, right? They're in their industry. So think about how you can make connections in an industry that you are excited about or you want to get into, not UX, but the actual industry. Maybe it's retail, maybe it's finance, and make network connections in those industries. That's your foot in the door. Because the UX, we're all elbow to elbow trying to get in the same door, right? But if you can get into the industry door, that's a leg up that I don't think that a lot of people share.
I totally love that. Yeah, I think that opened up my eyes too. I have never thought of entering into an industry first and then figuring out UX within it. That's very fascinating. Thanks, Jen.
I know
Because like you said earlier, sorry, Manu, it's like you can teach the UX skills that are applicable. I've worked in healthcare, finance, security, cloud computing. I don't know anything about any of that stuff, but I know UX and I can learn the industry when I get in there. But
Yeah.
my UX skills are transferable across industries.
Across industries. Very true.
And if you're in a role that's not UX based and you want to get into a role that's UX based, go to the people in your company. Hey, I'm interested in learning this thing. Is there anything I can help with? Understand you'll be balancing tasks and responsibilities, right? And they can maybe only do so much. But I know someone who he wanted to go into UX design. He worked for Home Depot in a store. We connected him with some people who worked in design in Atlanta for Home Depot. And then he eventually became a designer at Home Depot. So he used his internal connections. We found him a couple of people, and then he was able to make that job switch. So that's also something to look at.
Yeah, that's a good point. Our department just had hired a re-ops person that's from another department because she connected with our research group and established relationships and mentorship in the company, but she was interested in user experience. And so that 100%, I love that recommendation.
Another point I wanted to add to most of us who have been questioning on entry-level positions is look at the company that you're applying to. If it's a large company like how Jen mentioned, they would probably be looking at someone with experience, or someone who, or vice versa. They could probably be looking at junior positions as well. But if it's a single person kind of a company where you are the unicorn, you would be expected to have some hands-on experience, some 3 years or 4 years or 5 years. So do research on the companies you're applying to. Just don't blindly apply. Apply to the companies which have probably a section of researchers, and there is a path to growth, like lead researcher, senior researcher, research manager, research director, junior researcher. There are some companies which have starting positions from junior researchers. They need analysts, they need researchers who can help a senior researcher. There are companies which have these classifications. Do some research on that company that you want to apply for as a researcher too, versus applying for startups or fancy companies which really require a unicorn to jump in and take on and do things miraculously for them.
Like, this is an amazing insight. Like, I'm on the edge of my seat and I'm taking notes. I know there are a lot of questions in the chat, so I'm going to pass it over to Anna just to make sure we have some time for Q&A.
Thank you, Haley. Thank you, Adrienne, Manu, and Jen. That was wonderful. I think, I know Jen saw it, but we do have a comment that said, this is the best webinar I've ever been to. So I am so happy with all of your answers and really inspiring people, but also your honesty. I think everyone is extremely appreciative of that. And I also, as someone that works in the career space, I am particularly, I just want to shout out kind of your like peer mentoring and how you support, like how you really emphasize like supporting, don't hesitate to connect with people that are also starting out, because you never know where they're going to go, and don't just focus on, what someone you think that's going to immediately get you a job. So Haley was correct. We do have a lot of questions, and so we're not going to be able to get to all of them, but we're going to break it kind of into two different areas. We'll start first with kind of some questions in the details of like the research work, and then we'll finish with career questions and resources that you recommend and things like that. But one question that I saw a few places from people is how to decide what research method is best for each situation. And then specifically, like if you're a beginner, what research method, like does it make sense to like focus in on one research method, or be more of a, or would you find yourself kind of exposed to all different kinds? Who wants to take this one?
I can take it. Like I said earlier, you can pick up on skills and methods anytime on the job. I have confidence that if you have come this far, you can get a little farther by taking up any course, a crash course, and learn about a method. Once you do it, you get a hang of it, you do it over and over again, you become an expert at it. So I would say do not focus heavily on methodologies that you have used. Just know the methods though. I'm not saying do not look into it, but then do not be obsessed with trying out every method before proving your importance to the hiring manager or to the company that you're going to. At the same time, I would say think of methods as they can always be creative. You can always be creative. I've worked with PhDs in the past, academic researchers who come up with very creative ways of doing research. It doesn't have to be a known method. You can come up with a stitch mix method of something that you have thought would actually get you the answers, that can get you the answer in a certain method. So you can also be creative by using creative methods, like combining methods in terms of a diary study with and followed up with an interview, or an interview followed with a focus group leading to more diary studies. So you can mix and match methods and get more creative around it. So I would say, so your question about which methods to be focused on, or should be focused on methods or not, I think that gives you a good sense of understand the role of methods in the market as it is. We are mostly doing interviews, mostly doing surveys. So get yourself very well versed with talking to people, develop your communication skills, be more inquisitive, and get those soft skills that you require for interviews, because that will take you a long way to other methods as well.
So when we talk about methods, I agree with everything she said. When we talk about methods, here are the things, before you choose a method, here's what you need to know. What questions are we trying to solve or ask, right? What do we need to learn from this research? What do we plan to do with it? And who are we talking to? Okay. You need to understand those things before you can choose a research method. You also need to know, how do your stakeholders like information? So we can do amazing qualitative research with 8 to 12 people, but then you have businesses and organizations who don't care if it's less than 500. So taking all of those things into consideration, then you pick a research method. The other thing that's important to understand is what you can and cannot do with each methodology, right? So, like Manu said, over time you can pull anything out, right? But you have to be able to answer those questions with 100% certainty, right? Before you even go down a path, because they're not all made the same.
Yeah, I think that's really great. I think that's key. What are we trying to learn? Because a lot of times a stakeholder will come to you. Will you send out a survey? For what? Why? They'll come to you with a method because they read it, they know it. Oh, we'll do a focus group. That will be faster than interviews. Don't get me started on that. Uh, but have a conversation, educate them as well as like, hey, let's back into what do we want to learn from this? And then we can talk about how to do it. But we want to learn what do we want to learn is the key to clearly defining and aligning on before we ever talk about a method.
The other things to add is, how much time and how much money do we have?
Right. That's true.
The problem with junior researchers or entry-level researchers is they get asked with the method in mind first, like you're saying, I need a survey. They may not have the power or the potency to push back and say, why do you need it? Because they're just still juniors. They are still hesitant to push back on stakeholders. This is something that I have personally encountered myself. It took me some level of seniority to push back and say, hey, that doesn't make sense. Let us talk about what other methods we could use. But for junior researchers on the call who are just beginning to step into the door, I would say catch hold of one or two methods which are globally very handy, like interviews, diary studies, writing a good survey, a 10-question survey. It's so difficult to write a 5-question survey. So practice how to squeeze in a list of your questions into 5 questions or 10 questions. Get some basic skills first, and then you can begin to have a conversation with your stakeholders. Maybe if it's not an interview, maybe a survey. At the max, a survey or an interview. Very few cases you go into a higher level of methodologies like a thorough diary study or a contextual inquiry or an ethnographic study. And not every corporate engages in such methods all the time. It's mostly interviews or quick and dirty surveys or getting some data from the feedback or getting intercept surveys, just guerrilla testing, anything that can give you some data. So get yourself into more well-versed with methods that are very common and global, and then expand your expertise into other niche methods. And then once you go 2 years into the career, you feel more comfortable to push back and say, do you have the money? Do you have the time? Do you feel like you need this data? Why can't we leverage data and analytics? Why can't we use data sciences for this? Why only research? Do you need qual? Do you need quant? I think all these questions come with seniority and a little more self-confidence. Once you begin to gain that confidence in your career, you can start pushing back slowly.
Yeah, I think that's great. And man, I just want to reiterate something that you mentioned about interviews, right? If you get good at interviewing participants, you're going to get good at interviewing your stakeholders and building those relationships and building that communication and that trust. That skill set's the same no matter who you're talking to. So that's a really good skill set to develop. Dig in deep. Tell me why. Tell me more about that. How do we get to that? How do we get to that conclusion? You're going to ask participants that. Do that same thing with your stakeholders and really flex that muscle, because that interviewing and building those relationships with stakeholders, you're going to be doing that the rest of your career. So get good at that ASAP.
Thank you for that. As we kind of come to our close, we had a lot of questions about resources. And Jen, I know that you put one book already in the chat, which is totally awesome. But one question that really stood out to me is, where do you get like breaking news, or how to stay up to the cutting edge in the field? Like, do you have podcasts or conferences or things like that you attend, specifically on like, what is like trendy and what is kind of happening in the industry? I see Jen ready. Yeah.
Easy one. Follow Adrienne on LinkedIn because she's posting jobs articles, reposting, all the stuff. So Adrienne Guillory on LinkedIn, that's a huge resource for me. LinkedIn in general, but her for sure. Vitaly Freeman is also great for those who are more designers. He posts great stuff all the time. Vitaly Freeman from Smashing Mag. He posts great resources every day, so I follow him too. So, but definitely Adrienne for sure.
Wonderful. Anyone else have any, like, I guess if specifically, we also had a question specifically about interviewing resources, because I think I noticed in the comments like a lot of concern about like what the interview is actually like. So any resources to kind of for like mock interviews or kind of get yourself prepared for what that would feel like.
Jen, didn't UX Research and Strategy do one?
We did. I'll have to find the link
yeah,
for that.
So
okay, cool.
Going back to resources, also follow UX Research and Strategy. She downplayed that a lot. They are an international organization, and they do amazing content. So I would definitely check out their page and go through all their webinars and whatnot. They have a lot of really good resources for that. And then after that, it kind of comes down to what you're looking for and where you are in your journey. So you could probably do some pretty good Google searches. If nothing else, we've been busy making content the last 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely. As we only have 1 minute left, so I'll pass it to you, Manu, for anything you'd like to close with or any takeaways that you want people to have.
I'd say do not hesitate to apply for the roles you think speak to you. Do not double doubt yourself. Do not feel I may or do I get this job? Will I get this job? How far will I go in this career? Just step into the door, test it out. If it's not for you, you will figure it out in a year or two, or someone will fire you. Big deal. Just get into it, understand what you're good at, and go and follow your passion. Do not hesitate to seek help and ask questions when you have to. Those who are shy will not be able to get their answers. Can you not can you even interview participants? So just don't be shy about it. Just come outside and talk to people, interview people in your peers, and get some practice around it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I will say if you ever have the opportunity to interview, even if you are employed, do it. Do it for the practice. Do it to hear the curveball questions that are coming out these days.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely take any opportunity to interview. I was interviewing for a position many years ago and did not get it, but I made an impression. And when another position opened up, they reached out to me 6 months later and offered me a job. So always take the opportunity to do an interview. Even if you're like, I don't want to work at this company, you never know what connection and impression you are going to make for the future.
Well, I want to thank all of our panelists so much. We have come to the close of the hour, and thank you so much, Haley, for moderating today. Is there anything, Haley, that you'd like to close with before I finish?
Nothing that I could say could top what these ladies have said. So
100%, 100%. Thank you all so much. The comments and the reactions have been, I'm just over the moon. This has been really wonderful. So thank you so much. And thank you also to Specialist Staffing Group for putting this together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.